I'm Barbara McGarrian, and it's my great pleasure and privilege to welcome you to the Armenian Library and Museum this evening. We have a program that's going to be extremely interesting, and it's also a very important program as well, as I'm sure you realize, the Armenians in Turkey 100 years ago. You all know that the government of the Republic of Turkey has denied the genocide consistently, but it's also important to realize that part of that denial has been the denial even of the presence of the Armenian people in their historic homeland. And we've seen over the years, changes of the names of Armenian cities and towns in Turkey. We've seen the population statistics in which the number of Armenians has been minimized. We've seen the Armenian, the signs of the Armenian presence, the churches, the schools, the monasteries, the factories. All of these that were confiscated in 1915 have been neglected or they've been destroyed. And finally, I think the final blow is that the Western Armenian language, that beautiful prose that was part of the 19th century Armenian Renaissance, Western Armenian has become an endangered language. So I think it's very important for us as Armenians to do everything we can to keep the historic record accurate, that history books note the presence of the Armenian people in Turkey over so many centuries. And we're fortunate that in that effort we have many good friends, among them our speaker this evening. So I think this is a very important program. And I think it's important to note also that several organizations have come together to sponsor the program. The Armenian Library and Museum of America, of course, the National Association for Armenian Studies and Research, and Project Save Armenian Photograph Archive. As you know, we all have our unique mission, but there are many areas that we have of common interest, and I think it's wonderful when we deal with those areas that we can come and work together. And we have another sponsor this evening, a newer organization, the Friends of Hrant Dink. So I welcome you on behalf of all of those organizations. While I'm at the podium, I just want to make one brief announcement. The Armenian Library and Museum of America has mounted a new permanent genocide exhibit. We've had a genocide exhibit over the years. It seemed a little worn and out of date, so we have entirely replaced it with something new, something different. And there will be an opening of that exhibit on Sunday. And you're all welcome to come. It begins at 2 o'clock. Joining us on that occasion will be Ambassador Ruben Shugarian. Many of you will remember him as the first ambassador from the Republic of Armenia to the United States in the early 90s. He's now a lecturer at the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy at Tufts University. So he will be with us on Sunday, and there will be a brief concert. The program is open to the public, free of charge. We'd love to have you see the exhibit and tell us what you think of it. So I hope to see some of you there then. At this point, I'm going to turn the podium over to the academic director of the National Association for Armenian Studies and Research, Mark Lemigonian.
Thank you, Barbara. I would like to make a brief announcement as well in the spirit of collaboration. Next Wednesday evening, hopefully some of you can be here again as Alma and NAASR collaborate on another event, and that is the illustrated talk, The Life and Art of Sumbat, the painter Sumbat, and the talk is being given by Dr. Armenian of University of California, Berkeley, who is the son of the artist Sambat, whose watercolors of Armenian and Armenian life are probably familiar to you, whether you know the name or not. They're really lovely, and this is a great opportunity to hear more about the painter and to see the artwork projected. And that, again, is next Wednesday here in this room on May 25th. In having the pleasure of welcoming and introducing Osman Koker tonight, my first responsibility is, as Barbara did, to acknowledge with gratitude the efforts of our co-sponsors for the evening, Project Save, Armenian Photograph Archives, ALMA, and the Friends of Hrant, Dink. And indeed, without the generosity of the latter group, and the ceaseless efforts, in particular of Harry Parsekian, tonight simply would not have been possible. So thank you to Harry, thank you to everyone. Yes. I know, Harry, it's very embarrassing. I did it anyway. I can say that, in a sense, this evening is the culmination of 5 years of conversations, because Armen Aroyan, who many of you know, first brought me a copy of Osman's book, Armenians in Turkey 100 years ago, not long after it appeared in 2005 or 2006. And like everyone else who has ever looked at it, including many of you, I'm sure tonight, who are looking at it, maybe for the first time, I was floored by it and had simply never seen anything like it and had to have one, regardless of the cost. And it is an expensive book, but it's a book that whose expense you can thoroughly understand when you look at it, as opposed to some others that perhaps you wonder what exactly it is that you're paying for. A few of the pictures in it I had seen before, but most I had not, and never in such extraordinary quality. And the sheer number of them, from every corner of the Ottoman Empire, spoke volumes about the widespread and diverse Armenian existence that was effectively terminated in Turkey by the genocide in 1915. I suspect that few people in Turkey today have so complete an understanding of what was lost in 1915 as does Osman Koker. Through his exhibition Sireli Yeghpayrs, My Dear Brother, which has so far been mounted in Istanbul, Munich, Cologne, Frankfurt, Valence, Paris, Geneva, Yerevan, and London, and hopefully coming to these shores sometime in the not too distant future, as well as through the book of the exhibition. He has performed an invaluable service in documenting and presenting pre-genocide Armenian life in Turkey. He has a wider interest in the diverse cultures that once existed in Turkey, and through such books as The Souvenir of Liberty, Postcards and Medals from the collection of Orlando Calumeno, Once Upon a Time in Izmir, Greek Painters of Istanbul, and the exhibitions Once Upon a Time in Sivas, about the Armenians of Sivas, Souvenir of Liberty on the 1908 Revolution, The Blacks of Turkey, Once Upon a Time in Izmir on the multicultural past of Izmir, and Jamana, 100-year-old Armenian newspaper in Istanbul, among others. He has provided precious documentation of the rich cultures, of these rich cultures that have largely been erased. So, on behalf of NAASR, on Alma's behalf, Project Save, and the Friends of Hrant Dink, I'm very happy to ask you to join me in welcoming, wherever he is, Mr. Osman Koker.
Nice picture. That's such a nice quality. I should run the camera right at that. I mean, you don't have to move. I just have to push the button right there. No, you don't have to move.
Please forgive me, my English is not well. I have written a text about photographs, and I will try to read it when I show the postcards. Thank you. I hope you will understand my speaking. Nevertheless, the photograph is more important than my speech. Has any of you been in Turkey?
Oh, yeah.
Yes. We will go to Turkey tonight, but not today's Turkey. Some 100 years ago. Today, if you go to and take a glance at Turkey, you will think that you have a country where only Turks live in. But 100 years ago, the landscape was quite different. On this postcard from 1901 is seen the Yüksek Kaldırım Street in Istanbul. The signboard on the left shows the Hotel Eskişehir belonging to an Armenian called Gıdavciyan. The phrase Hotel Eskişehir Gıdavciyan was written in Ottoman Turkish, Armenian and Greek. Just behind it, you see another signboard in Ottoman Turkish, French and Greek. And on the right, the signboard in Ottoman Turkish, French, Armenian and Greek belonged to Hotel İzmit of Hacı Thomas. The multicultural signboard of a hotel may not be an extraordinary thing. Let's now look at this postcard then. Yes. A depot of coal and wood at Kadıköy district in Istanbul. Its signboard is written in 5 languages with 5 separate alphabets: Ottoman Turkish, Armenian, Greek, French, and Ladino, or Jewish Spanish. A postcard issued after the 1908 revolution, putting an end to the autocratic regime of Abdülhamit. Again, it is no wonder that the slogans such as "Long live the Constitution" and "Liberty, Equality, Fraternity" were written in 5 languages with 5 separate alphabets: Armenian, Greek, Ottoman Turkish, French, and Ladino. This map shows the present borders of Turkey, but the territory of the Ottoman state was larger before the First World War. Syria, Palestine, Iraq, and Yemen were within the borders of the Ottoman state. On the other hand, Kars and Ardahan were under the domination of Russia. The population data from both Turkish and Armenian sources are given comparatively in my book. And now I will present the population data by years in the official Turkish resource. If the 1914 census is adjusted to the present borders of Turkey, the following picture will emerge. The 1914 census. 10% of the total population were Armenians, and some 22% non-Muslims. The 1927 census, the first census in the Republican period. The percentage of all non-Muslims dropped down to 2.5%, and of Armenians below 1%. That dramatic change has due to the massacres and exiles carried out between 1915 and 1922, as well as the population exchange between Turkey and Greece in 1924. The 1965 census. That is the last census giving the ethnic and religious composition of the population. In the subsequent censuses, it was forbidden to express the ethnic and religious composition of the population. And after 1985, The questions about the ethnicity and religiosity were regarded as separatist and given up. In 1965, the percentage of non-Muslims dropped below 1%, and of Armenians down to 0.25%. Estimated population for today. Now we can only make an estimate. The percentage of Armenians is less than 1 per million. I have edited a book named Armenians in Turkey 100 years ago with postcards from the collection of Orlando Calumeno, and I created an exhibition named Sireli Yeghpayrs, or My Dear Brother, in 2005. The postcards I show in this presentation are from my exhibition and collection of Orlando Calumeno. This postcard was on the first panel, excuse me. The Vilayet of province. The Vilayet or province of Edirne. The names below the map show the major Armenian settlements in the Vilayet. The first numbers give the Armenian population according to Ottoman census of 1914. And the second figures are the numbers of Armenians according to the book Armenian Church, published in 1910 by a former Armenian Patriarch, Orlando. When we go to Karaağaç, the westernmost district of the westernmost city of Turkey, we are greeted by Hotel Geneva. This hotel was built in 1894 and owned by an Armenian called Dink. The man you see in front of the building is most probably him. He was also involved in various trades, notably in wine trading. The Sancak, or independent sub-province of Biga, its capital was Çanakkale, or Dardanelles. The Sübkevok Church of Çanakkale, at the site with cross. This building still exists, albeit without the original belfry. After being used as a depot for a long time, finally it is being transformed into a cultural center by the local authorities. The Vilayet of Yerevan, its capital is Bursa. About 10,000 Armenians lived in the city of Bursa. Sericulture and textile were the sectors in which Armenians played an important role. Some pages of the official journal of the city, Yerevan, were published in Armenian also. Armenian quarter in Bursa, Setbaşı. The diocese of Armenians, the church of Sırf Asvazazin, the schools were beyond the high walls on the right. The Institute of Sericulture of Bursa, established in 1887 to improve sericulture. Although it was an official Ottoman establishment, the founder and director of the institute was an Armenian called Kevork Torkomyan. Nearly all the teachers and students of the institute were Armenians too. The spinning mill of Bay Brothers. The owner of the factory is a Catholic Armenian, Gregoire Bay. More than 4,000 Armenians lived in Eskişehir. This postcard shows a merchant workshop in Eskişehir. Do you know merchant? It is a white, soft stone. It is used to make pipe and ornaments. Lüle taşı in Turkish. Yes. We are able to infer from the workers' cap that they were Muslims. The men and the women at the center in Western costumes must be the owners. If we take a glance at the commercial yearbooks, we will find that in 1910s, nearly all the firms operating in the merchant sector were owned by Armenians. In the capital, Istanbul, Apostolic Armenians had 14 churches and 64 schools, and Catholic and Protestant Armenians had their own churches and schools. Between 1900 and 1910, 158 newspapers and journals were issued in Armenian or in Turkish with Armenian letters. The view of Samatya from the sea. The building at the center was the Watertown school. On the right was the church of Subkavok, and further on the right was the Sarkan school. The names of the schools written on the buildings are seen. The church and the schools are active today, but the Armenian writings on them disappeared. Anyway, nowhere in Turkey can you find any explicit writing in Armenian anymore. Now you see Hotel Tokatlian in Pera or Beyoğlu. Built on the Grand Rue de Pera, now İstiklal Caddesi, the hotel belonged to an Armenian called Mıgırdiş Tokatlian. It was the most popular hotel of the period. Tokatlian had two more hotels on the Bosphorus. One on the southern and the other on the northern end of the Tarabya Bar. Mıgırdiş Tokatlian was forced to leave his three hotels and go abroad in 1920. Let's not tell negative stories all the time. The Church of Subtakavor in Kadıköy in Istanbul. It is still active. The interior has not been changed very much. Even the chandelier remains. The Sancak of Izmit, Nicomedia, including the cities of Izmit and Adapazarı, was the region in which Armenians were most concentrated in the West. 20% of the total population were Armenians. Armenian district in Izmit. In the background, on the left, is the Hünkar Köşkü, or Sultan's residence, built for Sultan Abdülmecit. The architect of the residence was Garabet Balyan. And the clock tower on the right was the work of Mihran Azaryan, an Armenian architect. Bardizak, now Bahçecik. Bardizak was an Armenian town with a population of some 10,000. It was a resort for the Armenian intellectuals and culturally advanced. There was even a printing house in the town. Between 1900 and 1914, 7 newspapers and journals were issued. On the postcard, you see the school founded by American missionaries, Bithynia High School. The compound was built in the outskirts of the city. Only the building on the left remains today. The Vilayet of Aydın, its capital is Izmir or Simir. Here is the Armenian district in Izmir. On the right in the rear is the church of Stepanos. Around the church there were Araşnortaran, the schools of Mesropian and Hipsimyan, a nursery school, and a Greek library. The district was also home to the church of Tilkorlu Sovaric. On these two postcards, you see the exterior and interior of the church of Stepanos. What about the quarter which, together with the nearby Greek neighborhood, was the richest district of the city? After the Turkish army entered in Izmir in 1922, these quarters, called Infidel Izmir or Gavur Izmir, were burned down. Now, this spacious area is used as exposition grounds for the annual International Izmir Fair. Last year, I held an exhibition called Once Upon a Time in Izmir, exactly on the spot where the church had once been. I put a red dot on the postcard and wrote, "You are here, Armenian Quarter Inodes, burned down in 1922. A postcard publicizing Takvo Ispartalyan's carpet manufacturing. It manufactured all kinds of carpets of Turkey. The headquarters of the firm was in Izmir. It also had a branch in London and agencies in nearby cities and towns. Armenians of the Western Anatolia were renowned for their skills in weaving and trading carpets, an important export item of the Ottomans. The majority of them were of Iranian origin. They carried the craft to Anatolia, maintained it, and taught it to others. This postcard shows a carpet manufacturing. We may assume the young girls to be non-Muslims, Greeks and Armenians, for they allowed themselves to be photographed without a scarf. But the young girls on this postcard are turbaned. The postcard is written in Arabic letters. You may say, here is a Turkish firm. However, if you read it, you will find out that even though the workers were Muslims, it was a postcard advertising 3 Armenian firms: Silikciyan, Spendian, Kahyayan, manufacturing and trading all sorts of Armenian carpets on the top. Processing and exporting raisins and figs were largely the monopoly of Armenians. Here you see Canik Elmasyan's fig factory in Izmir. The Vilayet of Konya. Here is the Armenian quarter in Konya, a postcard by an Armenian publisher, Boğaz Tateosyan. Here is an Armenian school in Konya, Cenayan College. the Vilayet of Ankara. Some 10,000 Armenians living in the city of Ankara, the population of which was less than 30,000 at the beginning of the 20th century. In this postcard, you see dealers of tiftik, or fleece in English. Goat fleece was one of the most important export items of the Ottomans. There were some Greek and Turkish dealers, but the bulk of the trade was in the hands of Armenians. The monastery of Subkarabet, near the village of Efkere in Kesaria. It was an important place of pilgrimage and home to a seminary. Now the building is within a military zone. The Vilayet of Kastamonu. This is Subkarabet Bank. Yes. The Vilayet of Kastamonu. The town of İnebolu was an important port connecting Istanbul to the central Anatolia. Some 200 Armenians lived in this town. Greek and Armenian houses were on the right bank of the brook, dividing the town into two parts. In the collection, there are about 20 postcards depicting İnebolu. As we prepared the book, we noticed accidentally that these two adjoining postcards complemented each other. It is amazing and full of surprises to work with the postcards. The Vilayet of Trabzon. The monastery of Sultan at the Kaymaklı district in Trabzon. It was located on the eastern reach of Boztepe and home to the diocese, Armenian diocese. The monastery was built in the 15th century and consisted of 5 buildings. I visit this monastery once in every 3 or 4 years. The side buildings were largely ruined, but the church in the center survives, and it is used as stall. Many of the frescoes on the interior walls remain. The roof collapsed, but was rebuilt. In one of the niches, I saw an egg. The niche functioned as nesting box for the hens. Ottoman School and the Church of Subkarabet in Bafra. Bafra is near Samsun. Now there is a new Turkish school named İsmet Pasha in the place of the Torkomen. The Vilayet of Sivas. A photo from the collection of Orlando Calumeno shows the 1912 graduates and the director of Ilyusimian schools of girls in Sivas. There were more than 2,000 Armenian schools in Turkey at the beginning of the 20th century. Starting mid-19th century onwards, some Catholic and Protestant schools were built by missionaries. These missionary schools served both as an incentive and a model for the Armenian communities to start building their own schools, since they were concerned that their children would be brought up as Catholics or Protestant. Armenian College in Merzifon. It was founded by Armenian missionaries. There were 5 more buildings like this one. Half of the teachers and students of the Anatolia College were Armenians. The rest is mostly Greek. The college was populated by Armenian students from a wide region stretching to Trabzon and Ankara. It had a very large library as well as a botanical museum. Several workshops were founded within the college so that the students would grow up as self-sufficient individuals. The Botanical Museum of the college was established by Can Hovannes Manisagyan, one of the Armenian teachers. It had samples of 2,000 plants, some 1,000 butterflies and insects, birds, wild animals, rocks and fossils, etc., collected from various regions of Anatolia. The Vilayet of Adana. Baramian School in the Armenian quarter of Adana. The period of 1900 and 1914 was not free of problems, but quite a calm period compared with the massacres of 1895 and 1915. The only exception was the massacre of 1909 in Adana, around which some 2,000 Armenians lost their lives. The Armenian quarter of Adana was largely burned and destroyed. When we saw first the rubble in front of the building, we think that the postcard is about these events. But the date of 1908 on the seal indicates that it is not destruction, but construction. In the book and the exhibition, there are some postcards indicating the devastation in 1909. The debris in the Armenian quarter. American mission destroyed with cannon shot. A Syrian church and school were also among the destroyed. The final state of the quarter. The Vilayet of Aleppo. The city of Aleppo and the Kesap region are now beyond the borders of Turkey. The church of Sub Asvazazin in Antep. It was built by the imperial architect Sakis Balyan in 1892. Together with the Arash Nortaran and the school nearby, it constituted a complex. In subsequent years, it was used as a prison in Republican period. After 1980, when a new prison was built, it was converted into a mosque. It is now called Kurtuluş Camii or Liberation Mosque. German Hospital of Maraş. The new building of German hospital with 22 beds was built by German missionaries in 1912. It served mostly Armenians. After the German defeat in the First World War, it was transferred to the Middle East Relief in 1919. I am from Maraş. When I was a child, this building was used as a library for children. Our house in the same quarter, and I spent much time reading books in this building Anywhere, it is Armenian history. Armenian Carter and the Church of Surp Asvazazin in Urfa. The photo was taken from the castle. Like many Armenian buildings in Urfa, the church survives too. In the past, it was used as a depot and a facility for the electricity network of the city. It has now been restored and converted into a mosque. It is now called Selahattin Eyyubi Camii. The Vilayet of Mamrat al-Aziz. Its capital is Mezre, now Elazığ, near the old city of Harput or Harput. Armenian quarter in Harput. The village of Diyarbakır. A general view of Diyarbakır. You must have noticed the minarets and the belfry. The photo was taken before 1914. The items on the roof are beds and mosquito nets for people sleeping on the rooftops in summer. The long tower at the center was the belfry of the Armenian Church of Sturgaragos. The belfry was rebuilt in 1914. This postcard compares the new belfry with the previous one in Diyarbakır. The new belfry on the left was more magnificent than the other. The new belfry was taken down in 1916 by cannon shots after the Armenian people of the city was killed and sent to exile. The Vilayet of Erzurum. On this postcard, you see one of the Armenian quarters in Erzurum. The quarter was home to the Armenian Church of Surp Asvazazin, the diocese, and Sanasaryan school. It is sufficient to look at the belfry on the next postcard in order to understand how magnificent the church was. Considering the height of the man in the belfry, we may assume it to be over 30 meters. Here is the Sanasaryan school. It was founded in Erzurum by philanthropist Mugilish Sanasaryan of Tbilisi for the education of poor Armenian children. After the First World War, the school was closed because there did not remain any Armenian children in the city. It would become home to the Congress of Erzurum, held in 1919. At the Congress, the foundation of the Turkish national movement were laid. You can find this information, you cannot find this information in any Turkish history book. The Vilayet of Bitlis. There were huge monasteries in the Vilayet. The monastery of Surp Arkelos, or San Apostolos, near Mush. The monastery of Surp Garabet. It was 30 kilometers away from Mush. The Vilayet of Van. The church of Surpaç on the island of Ahtamar in the Lake Van. The church was built in the 10th century and is regarded as a distinguished example of Armenian architecture and masonry. Recently, it has been restored. Kars region was under the domination of Russia between 1877 and 1917. A general view of Kars and the Church of Subarakelos. The church was built in the 10th century. Under the Ottomans, it was converted into a mosque in 1578-9. After 1877, under the Russian domination, it was again converted into a church, but a Russian Orthodox church. Although the belfry on the left was built during the Russian rule, it was in harmony with the Armenian architecture. After the withdrawal of Russians in 1917, it went back to being an Armenian church. But in 1920, when the region was annexed to Turkey, it was converted once again into a mosque. It was then used as a depot and a museum for a while. Finally, it was once more converted into mosque, Kümbet Camii. After I published the book, I have been trying to inquire and document the present state of old Armenian places. Unfortunately, few of the buildings have survived. As a matter of fact, some Armenian villages, even towns and cities, were wiped off the map. Harput is one of them. The photo at the top was taken approximately in 1900. The one at the bottom was taken by me last year. In a few years, the results of my inquiries will be collected in a book titled 100 Armenian Places, 100 years ago and 100 later. You have seen these postcards of Subgarabet Monastery near Mush. This is another postcard of the same monastery. They are published before 1915. This photograph was taken in 1917 by a medical doctor, Karakin Shah Nazarian, member of the Armenian voluntary group. According to the Turkish official thesis, Armenians only relocated in safe lands during the war. If it is right, what happened to this monastery in 2 years? I visited the monastery last year. Nothing left from the monastery except for these. During the Republican period, it was completely taken down, and the stones were used to build a new village. You see the cross on the wall. Yes. If you please, let's look at the town of Armash from this point of view and see what happened to this Armenian town in 100 years. Armash was an Armenian town with a population of 4,000, 30 kilometers northeast of Izmit. The life of the town revolves around the monastery of Asvazazin. If you look at it from the distance, the monastery and the seminary will become prominent. At the center is the church of Asvazazin. Around it is the buildings of the seminary. You see the church more closely. Considering the people in front of the building, we can imagine the size of the church. Another postcard from the church. One of the buildings of the seminary. We see the students by the fountain, and they are in the fields that belong to the monastery. The mill belonged to the monastery. The logo of whose a journal published in Armash from the 4th issue of 1864. This photo is from 1922. There are no Armenians left in town. That enormous church has become such. In 1924, the immigrants from Greece were settled here. Newcomers rebuilt the demolished walls of the church and converted it into a mosque. You noticed the traces of the old windows and doors on the walls of the mosque. And the name of the town was changed into Akmeşe, from Armaş to Akmeşe. In 1994, that building was demolished completely. So the church disappeared definitely. And a new mosque was built. I have already shown that this building belonged to seminary. It was sound till 1999. The roof was damaged in the earthquake of 1999. We hoped that it would be repaired. But one day, the teams of Izmit municipality came and demolished it too. Only the mill remains sound. Such is its former state. Whenever I went to the town, I could see in the street a mortar dated from 1871. Now, I can no longer see it. No one knows what happened to it. There were Armenian gravestones in the doorsteps. Oh. An Armenian gravestone at the corner of a building. It is lost now too. The building has been destroyed and rebuilt after the earthquake of 1999. There were Armenian gravestones in the doorsteps. Now they are diminishing. This is the inscription of the huge fountain of the monastery. During my first visit, it was on the fountain. On the second visit, I saw it in the garden of gendarme station, broken and upside down. And on the subsequent visits, I could not find any trace of it anymore. Some parts of the enclosure walls of the monastery still remains. It is claimed that this cave-like place is where the hues had once been printed. Well, that photo shows the stage of Armaş in 1914 and This one displays the state of Armash, now Akmeşe, in the year of 2000. I have finished my presentation. Thank you very much.
We will take some questions, and we have a helper on hand. Herman Perutian has kindly agreed to help with on-the-spot translation as needed. So please, when you're called on, stand up and shout out your question. Yes, sir.
Do you have any information on Aintab? Just now, Gaziantep?
Antep hakkında şüphesiz bilgim var.
Of course, I have some knowledge about it.
Kitabımda sadece şehirler değil, bütün Ermeni köy ve kasabaları hakkında temel bilgileri verdim tekste.
In my book, I not only have information about the cities, but I have information about all the villages and towns of Armenian towns and villages.
Yani hangi şehirde ne kadar Ermeni yaşıyordu, bunların hangi kiliseleri, manastırları, okulları vardı, Ermeni halkının esas uğraşı neydi ve sosyal hayatları neydi, şehir şehir, kasaba kasaba, köy köy, hepsi kitapta anlatılıyor.
The book has all the information about the demographics in various towns, how many Armenians there were, what churches there were, what they did, what their occupation was, what schools there were, etc. And that's all in the book.
Ve kitapta sanırım Antep'den de 15 kadar kartpostal var.
And I think there are about 15 postcards in the book from Aintab.
You were saying to me earlier that Gesaria was now a military zone. Could you expound on that a little bit?
Kayseri'de Surp Garabet Kilisesi'ne, manastırını gösterdim kartpostalda.
In Gesaria, I showed the Surp Garabed Seminary in the postcard. Monastery. Sorry.
Manastır şimdi askeri bölgenin içinde, military zone'un içinde. Ama manastır tüm Kayseri askeri bölge içinde değil.
It's not that the entire city is within military zone. It's that monastery is within a military zone right now.
Osman, could you talk about the collection of postcards itself, how it came into being, and how you find additional materials as you're doing your research?
Koleksiyonun sahibi ben değilim. Orlando Calumeno adlı birisi.
The owner of the collection is
Orlando Calumeno. Türkiye'de yaşayan Türk vatandaşı ama köken olarak İtalyan Katolik kökenli bir iş adamı.
he lives in Turkey. He's a Turkish citizen, but by heritage he's an Italian Catholic businessman in Turkey.
Sadece Ermenilerle ilgili değil, bütün Osmanlı şehirleri hakkında 7-8 bin kartpostal var koleksiyonunda.
He has a collection of 7,000 to 8,000 postcards, and not only about the Armenians, but in all different aspects of the Ottoman life.
Ben aslında böyle bir albüm kitap yapmayı başlangıçta düşünmüyordum. Ermeniler konusunda 100 yıl önce nasıl yaşadıklarına dair bilgi veren bir tekst kitabı hazırlıyordum. Buna birkaç tane de fotoğraf koyayım diye düşündüğümde böyle bir koleksiyoncunun varlığını fark ettim ve ondan anlaşarak kitaba onları koyma izni aldım. Böylece kitap da bir albüm kitaba dönüştü.
My initial intention wasn't to have a publication about the postcards. I was working on the history of the Armenians 100 years ago and for a book, but through that research I identified or came across the collection, and then one thing led to another, and it turned out to be a collection of postcards published.
What has been the reaction to your book in Turkey?
Kitabı 2005 yılında yayınladım ve kitapla beraber, kitap biraz büyük ve pahalı bir kitap olduğu için herkesin yararlanması için bir sergi açmaya karar verdim ve kitap yayınlandığında bir sergi açıldı 2005 yılının Ocak ayında.
January 2005, when the book was published at the same time, because it was a relatively expensive book and not necessarily available to everybody. In order to bring it to people, I opened an exhibition of the postcards at the same time in Istanbul.
Sergi 11 gün kadar açık kaldı ve 8-9 bin kişi geldi sergiyi ziyaret etmeye. Bu o zamana kadar Türkiye'de en fazla ziyaret edilen sergi oldu.
The exhibition was open only for 11 days. There were 8,000 to 9,000 people who came in that period to visit the exhibition, and at that time it was one of the most commonly visited exhibitions in Istanbul.
2005'in başında henüz Ermeni konusu Türkiye'de yaygın olarak konuşulmuyordu ve gergin bir ortam yoktu. İnsanlar ilk defa, büyük bir kısmı insanların ilk defa bu sergi konusunda, sergi sayesinde bilgilendi. Ermenilerin ne kadar yaygın bir şekilde yaşadığına ve nasıl bir hayatları olduğunu.
In 2005, there was really not a lot of talk or discussion of the Armenian matter in Turkey. So this was an occasion to actually inform many people of the Armenian history. So it became an occasion for starting a conversation.
Did the Turkish government oppose at all to the publication of this book?
Türkiye'de kitap yayınlanırken izin alınmaz. Ben belli riskleri de göze alarak kitabı yayınladım. Ve sanırım çok iyi sundum kitabı insanlara, objektif bir şekilde anlattım. Ondan dolayı da herhangi bir soruşturma falan açılmadı hakkında.
In Turkey, you do not have to get permission to publish a book. I knew the risks, but I think it was handled well. It was published and it was presented in a nice way, and there were no problems. Didn't experience any problems.
Do you have any further postcards on the cardinals, on Gelibolu, and Immaculate?
Çanakkale hakkında 20 kadar kartpostal var kitapta. Gelibolu hakkında da bir o kadar kartpostal var.
There are about 20 about the Dardanelles and about 20 around Gelibolu.
Bazı bölgeler kartpostal konusunda şanslıdır. Genellikle ticari yollar üzerinde olan yerlerin çok kartpostalı vardır. Ama kıyıda köşede kalmış yerlerde daha çok Ermeni yaşıyor olsa bile onlar hakkında ya hiç kartpostal yoktur ya da çok azdır.
There were some areas which were more fortunate for having more postcards from the area, particularly if that were connected to business and commerce. From those areas, there are a lot more postcards than some other areas, even though there may be a large population of Armenians, but if there was not a lot of trade, there would not be a lot of postcards from those areas.
Gelibolu'da da bir Ermeni fotoğrafçı ve kartpostal yayıncısı vardı. O sayede orası hakkında çok kartpostal var.
In Gelibolu, there was an Armenian photographer and a publisher of postcards, so for that reason, there was quite a bit from Gelibolu.
the postcards, the 7,000 or 8,000 in the collection, all collected from Turkey, or did this man go around Europe and elsewhere to collect them?
Belki şaşıracaksınız ama koleksiyoncu benden daha genç birisi.
You might be surprised, but the owner of the collection is actually someone younger than I.
Sanırım 15 yıldır bu koleksiyonu biriktiriyor. 15-20 yıldır.
He's been collecting only for about 15-20 years.
Bu tür malzeme birçok yerde satılabiliyor. Yani ailelerden aldığı şey çok enderdir. Satın alma yoluyla biriktirmiştir bunu esas olarak.
Most of the postcards were actually purchased as opposed to finding them from families.
Bildiğim kadarıyla Türkiye'nin her yerinde, Avrupa'da, hatta Arjantin'den, Amerika'dan ve şimdi internet de sayesinde çok hızlı bir şekilde alım yapabiliyor.
Not only from Turkey, but from Europe and as far as away as Argentina, were the sources for the postcards, and now with the internet he can find them even more readily.
Doğrusunu söylemek gerekirse kitap yayınlamaya başladığım, karar verdiğimizde çok fazla değildi elimdeki kartpostal. Kitabı yayınlayacağımız belli olduktan sonra birkaç koleksiyoncunun koleksiyonu doğrudan satın alarak genişletti ve hala devam ediyor koleksiyon zenginleşmeye. Bu yıl içinde kitabın 2. ciltini yayınlayacağız. Onda da yine 700 kadar kartpostal bulunacak.
When we decided to publish the book, there were not as many postcards as there are now. After the decision was made, there were some collections that were acquired subsequently, and they're preparing for a second edition publication.
Evet.
This year there will be a second edition that's going to be published.
Second edition, second volume.
Oh, second volume. Yeah, second volume.
Mr. Koker, how did your passion for this subject matter develop? Where did it come from? And what have you learned as a result of your search for all these postcards? What conclusions have you come to?
Türkiye'de tarih hep Türkler üzerinden anlatılır. Tarih dediğimizde Türklerin tarihinden bahsedilir.
In Turkey, when you talk about history, it's always history of the Turkish people.
Özellikle bu şehirlerin tarihinde çok geçerlidir. Örneğin ilkokuldaki tarih kitaplarında mutlaka şehrinizin tarihi diye bir bölüm vardır. Ve orada o şehrin Türkler tarafından nasıl kurulduğu anlatılır.
There are specific histories particular to certain cities, and each city, elementary school students will be taught how that city was formed or came about by the Turkish occupants of that city.
Başka bir derste de Türklerin 11. yüzyılda Anadolu'ya geldiği söylenir ve o bilgiyle onun çelişiyor olması eğitimcilerimiz açısından hiç önemli değildir.
In other parts, they're taught that the Turks came to those lands in the 11th century, and so the inconsistency of some of these stories are lost and really not paid attention to by many.
Ermeniler dahil Müslüman olmayanlardan bahsedilecekse de bu sadece olumsuz figürler olarak bahsedilir. Onlar birden Birinci Dünya Savaşı sonunda ortaya çıkarlar, Türkleri arkadan hançerlerler, ihanet ederler ve sonra sahneden çekilirler.
When the talk comes to non-Muslim population, including the Armenians, they're always portrayed as coming into this scene around the time of World War I. They're always portrayed in a negative way as betrayers of the nation, and then they disappear.
Ben özellikle bu tür bir tarih anlayışının biz Türkler açısından problemli olduğunu düşünüyorum. Çünkü öyle yetişen kuşaklar aşırı milliyetçi, savaşa düşkün oluyorlar ve sadece kendisinden farklı insanlara değil, yani sadece Ermenilere, Rumlara falan değil, kendi içindeki farklılıklara karşı da düşmanca duygular besliyorlar.
I think that this teaching of history is problematic for the generation which results in ultra-nationalistic sentiments. And not only is it that they can't relate to Armenians or others, but they can't relate to other people with differences, and that's a problem.
Ben daha çok bu eğitimi değişmesi için ve genç kuşakların farklı bir şekilde yetişmesi için bu alanı ele attım.
My interest was to see a change in this educational style, and that for the new generation to be educated in a more consistent manner, and that was my interest.
Is the book in Turkish, English, or both? And do you have any here for purchase?
Kitap önce Türkçe yayınlandı. Arkasından Ermenice'ye, İngilizce'ye ve o sırada serginin açılacağı Almanca'ya çevrildi.
The book was first published in Turkish, and then in English, and then later to German.
Kitap burada var. Kitabın satışı burada yapılıyor.
And the books are available for purchase here.
Sadece o kitap değil, yayın evinin diğer kitaplarından da birkaç örnek getirdim. Onlar da burada incelenebilir ve satın alınabilir.
Not only that book, but other publications of the same publishing house are available here for you to look and consider for purchase.
Is there a copy of this visual presentation that would be available particularly for libraries, such as NAASR and Alma?
Zaten kitapta var, inceleyebilirler oradan. Kütüphanede de kopyası da var. Sanırım İngilizce kopyası kütüphanede yok, NAASR'da var. Bir kitap hediye edeceğim kütüphane İngilizce kopya.
All the pictures are in the books, and
No, I realize that. This is a different type of presentation.
He's telling you to make a video, Osman. He's telling you to make a video.
Henüz sağım yaşıyorum ve ben kendimi göstermek istiyorum.
Give my
I'd like to
card.
show the pictures myself. Anybody else?
You just did.
Were they Turkish or were they Armenian? What I'm getting at is, did the Armenians have a postal system? That's number one. The second question is, it shows the holiday in Istanbul. Was that scheduled or was it closed early?
Could you repeat the second? Well, let's take the first question.
Were the stamps Turkish or Armenian? Did the Armenians have a postal system?
French.
Osmanlı'da birkaç posta servisi vardı. Esas Osmanlı resmi servisi vardı. Her taraftaydı o. Onun dışında da İtalyanların, İngilizlerin, Fransızların, Avusturyalıların posta servisi vardı. Ermenilerin ayrı bir bağımsız posta servisi yoktu. Bütün kartpostalların çoğu Osmanlı servisinden geçmişti. Şeyler dahil, Adana katliamını gösteren o kartpostallar bile Osmanlı'dan geçme. Osmanlı postasından.
There were no Armenian postal services. There was the official Ottoman postal service, including the postcards that showed the massacres of Adana and the aftermath. Those were all through the Ottoman postal service. Then there were other postal services of France, Italy, etc., but the Armenians did not have theirs.
The other question was, when the exhibition was shown in Istanbul for 11 days, was it scheduled for 11 days or was it closed in advance of the scheduled time?
Salonu sadece 11 günlüğüne kiralayabilmiştim. Onun için 11 gün gösterildi.
No, we could only rent that space for 11 days, and that's why it was for 11 days.
Fakat 6 ay sonra bir kitap fuarı düzenleniyordu. Orada yeniden açtım.
6 months later, there was a book fair. There, I had the exhibition again.
İlk sergide daha çok konuyu zaten bilen insanlar gelmişti. İkinci sergi bence çok daha önemliydi. Kitap fuarına gelen herkes o sergiye bakıyordu ve çok interaktif bir ortamda geçti diyebilirim.
The first exhibition drew only people who actually were aware or knowledgeable about the subject. The second one, which was as a part of the book fair, drew all the people who were there for the book fair. So it was a much wider audience, and I feel it was a much more interactive exhibition than the first one. Two more? Okay.
The people who came to the event, was it young people, college students?
Sergiye yaş olarak da, etnik ve dini köken olarak da her türlü insan geldi. Açılış gecesinde 600 kişi gelmişti. Bunların yarısına yakın Ermeniydi, gerisi Müslümanlar diyebilirim, Türk falan.
The opening night there were 600 people. It was half perhaps Armenian and half non-Armenian and Muslims. But across the cross-section of people who came to the exhibit was all different ages, backgrounds, ethnicities, etc. So it was a mix of people who came.
Mesela diyelim ki 30 yaşında bir kadın geliyordu, bir gün sonra annesini alıp tekrar geliyordu, öbür gün çocuklarını alıp geliyordu. Yani defalarca geliyordu ve sergi 1-2 saatten daha kısa değildi serginin izlenme şeyi. Çok geniş bir sergi.
For example, there was a woman who would come, a 30-year-old woman would come one day, and the next day she would get her mother and bring her mother, and the following day with the children, and spend hours in the exhibition.
Roger, yes.
Just a quick question. Are these photographs in the public domain? Because sometimes you go onto Wikipedia on the internet, and old photographs, old postcards do appear on Wikipedia, and it says they're in the public domain. Would these be classified as being in the public domain? Yeah, I understand that. Original photographs as reduced. Years old.
Bu kartpostada çok kopya olarak basılıyordu. Kim satın alırsa, yani kalmışsa eğer farklı kopyaları alınabilir, mümkündür o. Onun dışında kimde ne koleksiyonları var onu bilmiyorum.
There were many copies of these postcards that were made, so they may be available in other places or other areas. So,
çok nadirdir bunlar.
but they are quite rare.
Thank you.
We'll stop there. Okay.
And with that, we will conclude. So.
You answered it the right way. I wouldn't hear the answer. But there were many copies made, so in other words, that's not the only source.
Thank you again to everyone for being here. Thank you especially to Osman and to the co-sponsors of the evening, and there are refreshments and books, and thanks for being here.
That's right. Because of the Mickey Mouse law, you know?
I don't know about Mickey Mouse.
Yeah.